not only the so-called early beginnings of the church, but of all the profane history of earlier times, in order that it might correspond and not conflict with the allegories of the Bible, which book, while it remained with the ancient Irish priesthood, was a record of spiritual idealisms and characters. When Rome appropriated this book, she strove at once to make of it a history, and to give Iessa a realistic and historical character. So the names in the Bible of places which had simply a secret allusion to spiritual things and human qualities and conditions in man, in his progress from the animal to the spiritual state of perfection, were given a different meaning and were converted into bona fide history. Thus, with a shrewd conception and understanding of policy, Rome gave to the Irish Bible a history and a geography which, through her efforts to give it the appearance of truth as a record of actual occurrences and facts, have heaped woe and misery upon mankind. To perfect this project, Rome preached and instigated the wars of the Crusades. This was for the express purpose of getting possession of the countries of the East and to give names to places in this country called Palestine or Syria to correspond with the allegorical and cryptic names, Irish names, in the Bible. And Irish names they are still to this day, and this is the main reason why the Irish Roman Catholics of our day were not encouraged to read or study the Bible. It was because of this, too, that the Irish language was mainly suppressed and all but destroyed. To carry out this scheme of keeping the knowledge of these things from the world, Rome has conveniently invented a list of fictitious names which the priests assumed in order to set up authorities supposed to have lived in the periods of time assigned to them, and who would be cited by posterity to verify the falsifications which they had established as facts. Such are the names Herodotus, Manetho, Berosus, Josephus, Irenaeus, Origen, and Eusebius. These historians appear, in the light which we have today of her doings, as so many fictitious personages to whom to attribute writings which were done by the Roman and British priests of much later times. They were very busy concocting history after the English invasion of Ireland and the conquest of the Irish Church, and right away in the early part of the 13th century they set about altering the Irish Bible to make it their own. This revision or alteration took place about the year 1208 of our era. King James agents have tried their hands at altering it since then, and it has been revised again in our day. At the time of this writing, the public press gives notice under date of May 22, 1922, that in the Presbyterian Convention held at Des Moines, Iowa, there was a movement on foot for a shorter Bible, but it failed of adoption. So the original Irish Bible has been tampered with and altered from time to time according to the interests or purposes of those able to do it. Chapter 10. Hebrew, a sacerdotal dialect improvised from the Irish language for the secret use of the priests. A mystery once explained is a mystery no longer. Yet I hold that the solution and explanation of the Bible origin is of vastly more interest and benefit to mankind than to allow it to remain a secret and a mystery. Intellectual mankind needs to know the truth. Fables or fiction cannot be substituted for it, nor will the great mass of inquiring minds concede that the clergy is the only class that is entitled to know the truth when it can be acquired, while the multitude may be regaled with fables and myths. It was in the spirit of this latter idea that the English churchman Dr. Burnet wrote his treatise De Statu Mortuorum, purposely in Latin, to instruct the clergy only, not for the benefit of the laity, saying that too much light is hurtful for weak eyes, Bible Myths, page 436. We do not agree with him in the sense that he wished to deceive men. Our purpose is to enlighten, and the proofs already given cannot be disputed or contradicted. The Old and New Testaments are just copies transcribed and made over and supplemented with additions from the ancient Aryan Gospels of the elder Magian priesthood of Arian or Aaron. I know that the Christian world will be surprised to learn that it has been so grossly deceived and imposed upon by Roman and English churchmen in this matter. Deception of the people as a policy was a principle on which both priesthoods were in hearty accord, much as they differed on denominational lines or in allegiance to different religious rulers. However, we have given out the real truth, and it cannot be denied, gainsaid, or explained away. The proof is now given out. It is as open and as plain as day for anyone who will take the trouble to investigate. Only a public ignorant of the Irish language could accept such a barefaced fraud. I declare that anyone who is at all competent to examine the facts as herein stated will be astonished to find it possible that such a lie could find credence. Under any other circumstances, only universal ignorance of the true facts could bring it about. Hence the Dark Ages were ushered in through the instrumentality of Rome and Britain. The very Bible names prove it. So also does the name of the Great Pyramid prove that it was built by this same order of the Irish Magian priesthood, the knowledge of which has also been suppressed. The Irish scriptures were palmed off on the world by Rome, with the aid of British priests who translated them into Greek, in order that it might pass for the original tongue in which they were composed. Then from that language they have been translated into other languages, such as Latin, Syriac, and others. The study of and instruction in the Irish language was not allowed, and as it was intended, it suffered a great loss in its cultural vocabulary. By this means they sought to drop all remembrance and to destroy all trace of the Bible origin and its authors. And this is why the Irish language was interdicted and forbidden to be taught in the schools or even to be spoken. At one time, the British government made it a crime punishable by death to speak it. See McGugan's History of Ireland. This makes it clear that the motive behind this policy was not, as hitherto advanced, solely a political one, but they found it convenient to retain the Irish idioms in the Bible for the name of God. It was difficult and next to impossible to find suitable substitutes in the translations for the ingenious and beautifully expressive titles of the deity and of the solar sun in the Irish language. It is the richest language in spiritual expression that has yet been evolved in which to utter praise to God. Sanskrit and Hebrew are its children or offspring. Both of these languages were composed and given written form by the Irish Aryan missionary priesthood, but at very different periods, hence the similarity of these languages to the Irish. Sanskrit was intended for the use of the priesthood, which the Irish missionaries established in India. It was changed to suit the vocal peculiarities of the people whose use it was intended for, just enough from the parent Irish in phonetic and inflectional aspects. There can be no doubt about it. Here's what Max Muller says, quote, "The Semitic languages also are all varieties of one form of speech, though we do not know that primitive language from which the Semitic dialects diverged. Yet we know that at one time such language must have existed. We cannot derive Hebrew from Sanskrit or Sanskrit from Hebrew, but we can well understand how both may have proceeded from one common source. They are both channels supplied from one river, and they carry, though not always on the surface, floating materials of language which challenge comparison, and have already yielded satisfactory results to careful analyzers." End quote. Max Muller's observations show that he was on the right path to discover the mother language of these two branches. All that he had to do was to look across the narrow sea which separates England from Ireland and find it there. Or did he not know that Irish was the one river which supplied both channels, and refrained from announcing it? He hits the nail so squarely on the head that it is hard to believe that so able and shrewd an investigator did not know. He was a professor of languages at Oxford, England, and well knew what an adverse statement would be aroused against him if he proclaimed it. He left it for another to do. England had for so long a time stood between Ireland and the rest of the world that after denuding her of her ancient landmarks and throwing a blanket of oblivion over her, he hesitated to remove it and be engulfed in the storm of wrath and enmity which he would arouse among the churchmen and the governing class of England. It is difficult for me to believe that so keen an observer was also, like so many other scholars and investigators, a credulous dupe, deluded by the false histories of the past ages as written by the Roman and British priest scribes. No, it is quite obvious that he knew his England, and if he wished to retain his professorship and standing, he had to be careful as to what extent he disclosed his discoveries and convictions. He was treading on forbidden ground. Hebrew was a secret dialect which was devised by the Irish priesthood to preserve their secret lore and rituals. Its use was kept exclusively for the priests, thereby keeping all knowledge of sacerdotal things from the uninitiated or the laity. As it was composed and made use of by the Irish priests of Iessa to preserve their secret lore, it was taken over and made use of by the Roman Church to conceal and to make plausible the secret fraud which she had perpetrated upon the Christian world. This explains why it was said that only one copy of the original first scriptures was written in Hebrew. And this also shows us why Hebrew is so nearly like the Irish language. To further this deception, she had them copied into Greek.